Chapter 481, Rune of Domination. A rune? Noah reached out, bracing against the crimson lightning that clung to the orb. When his hand touched the surface, the light faded and the orb dissolved into nothing. In its place, a mysterious rune shaped like a crimson trident slowly coalesced in the air before him, an Overlord rune. Noah understood now why those crimson bolts had danced across the orb earlier. The rune inside had been continuously leaking magic, which erupted from the orb and formed the suspended lightning. When he opened it, the power that had been contained within burst out like an unbridled stallion, spreading in all directions. Crackles and rumbles filled the training room. Bolts of violent crimson lightning lanced toward the ceiling, walls, and floor. Even though the room was built of the rare metal vibranium, the bolts began to etch cracks and dents into the structure, a clear sign of how terrifyingly potent this power was. Noah, standing between the blast and Lysandra, raised a hand and, drawing on his inner magic and the resolve rune, erected a guardian shield that took the brunt of the onslaught, shielding them both. He stared at the crimson trident rune with equal parts caution and exhilaration. He hadn't expected such a surprise from a summon. Another world rune had appeared in the final treasure chest. World runes were prime artifacts of Runeterra, each harboring extraordinary power that drew people to them. When Noah first activated the system, the beginner summon had given him one, the resolve rune, to help him through the early stages. Its power was immense. Even without the support of other heroes, the resolve rune had been enough to carry him through most major events. But world runes were dangerously seductive. Anyone exposed to their magic risked being drawn in, eventually becoming enslaved to the rune's will. When Noah first gained the resolve rune, it had that same pull. The system's beginner protection dampened the rune's power and its allure, allowing Noah to grow into it safely. Over time, through constant use and communion with the resolve rune, he had established a deep connection, near complete control. The system's restrictions on it had long since been lifted. This new crimson rune had no such safeguards. It was unrestrained, leaking surges of raw magic. Even after his long familiarity with world runes, Noah felt a peculiar tug at his soul and inner magic, a craving that made his breath catch. Thanks to his strength, will, and the stabilizing influence of the resolve rune, he kept his wits and resisted its pull. "Lysandra, are you all right?" he called, keeping the guardian shield between them and the storm. He expanded the shield with a surge of magic to cover more area, then turned to check on Lysandra. Though Noah's defense had kept the scattered lightning from touching her, he worried the rune's influence might still reach into her mind. "I'm fine," she said, flicking her right hand to conjure a ring of ice around herself. "There's a force trying to influence my thoughts and my inner magic, but it hasn't gotten in." Lysandra's soul had evolved from an artificial intelligence. She was not like ordinary people. While runes could tempt others, they could not touch her. Relief washed over Noah. "Good, be careful, we've drawn a big one," he warned, then refocused on the crimson trident floating before him. From its hue and form, he already knew what he faced. A crimson rune in a trident shape could only be the Overlord rune, one of the 5 great world runes. Its nature was the opposite of the resolve rune. Where resolve granted vast vitality and endurance, the Overlord rune embodied raw, explosive, destructive power. Noah could feel the difference in the chaotic energy it spilled now, untamed, surging, and violent. How to handle a world rune without system dampeners was unfamiliar territory. Noah's first priority was to calm it. Only by steadying its output could he attempt to take control. He pressed the guardian shield to the ground to anchor it, then walked through the protective barrier straight toward the rune. Surging energy slammed into him like a physical force, but Noah's body, reinforced by the stone man's power, took the impact. The blast ripped a hole in his vibranium training shirt, a reminder that this rune's leaked magic was nothing to scoff at. He didn't linger. He immediately wove a layer of magic to seal and protect his clothes, steadying himself for the next approach. Chapter 482, Communication Between Runes. After weathering the violent surge of magic and reaching the Overlord rune, Noah reached out to take it. The instant his hand neared the rune, a tremendous force flared from it. Startled, he jerked his hand back. This was the underground room beneath his house. If that power exploded here, it would blow the whole place apart. What's wrong with this thing? Is it just hypersensitive because it just arrived in the Marvel Universe? Noah muttered, fingers tensing. If he couldn't even get close, how was he supposed to tame this world rune? He tried several approaches with no success, rubbing his chin as he thought. If he couldn't calm it down, he'd have to move the rune somewhere else instead of keeping it in his basement where it could destroy everything. Then an idea hit him. He snapped his fingers. Maybe its good brother could calm it. Noah reached into his mind and called to the resolve rune inside him. He drew the green resolve rune out from his chest and let it float in his palm. Resolve rune, I've brought you your buddy, but it's agitated. Please try to calm it, he said, raising the rune to his lips. World runes had their own consciousness, much like the Infinity Stones. When the resolve rune, wrapped in life energy, felt the Overlord rune's fluctuations, it began to emit a green current that flowed toward the Overlord rune. The green life force pierced the violent aura and merged into the Overlord rune, sounding a kind of communication. Is it working? Noah asked himself, eyebrows lifting. He moved closer again, this time carefully. He didn't reach for the Overlord rune directly. He held the resolve rune out toward it. After the resolve rune infused some of its power into the Overlord rune, the violent surging subsided. Familiarity seemed to soothe it, and the room fell quiet. Noah couldn't understand the rune's language, but after a few seconds, the resolve rune sent him a simple impression. Roughly, it's done. The dangerous red lightning that had crackled around the Overlord rune vanished, and it floated placidly in the air. That should do it, Noah said, testing his luck. He opened his palm and, using his magic, drew the Overlord rune into his hand. This time there was no energy riot. The red rune simply hovered in his palm. Noah studied it. From his knowledge of the 5 talent runes in the game and seeing how the resolve rune behaved in reality, he guessed the Overlord rune was far stronger than the resolve rune. Resolve boosted his body and defenses with only modest offensive power. The Overlord rune, by contrast, was associated in the game with mages and assassins for huge burst damage. Its abilities in reality already felt potent. Still, Noah would only truly know what it could do after testing it. He looked around the training room. The previous energy impact had cracked walls and cracked floors. The room would need major repairs. This was not a place to experiment with a runic force this strong. It could easily rip the place apart. He tried to absorb the Overlord rune into his body the way he had the resolve rune, but a resisting field kept it out. Frustrated, he tucked the rune into his backpack. He'd find a more suitable, spacious location to test it later. He couldn't keep carrying it in his hand forever. He exhaled, letting his racing heart slow. The results of the summoning still filled him with excitement. He'd summoned the lava giant Malphite and a powerful Overlord rune, the best haul he'd ever gotten. It felt like a streak of pure luck. "Lysandra, you really are my lucky goddess," he blurted, unable to hide his joy. He stepped over to her and wrapped his arms around her slender waist. Through the soft knit of her dress, he could sense the cool, delicate beauty she carried, like ice and jade. Moved by the moment, Noah leaned in and pressed his lips to her face. Surprise flickered across Lysandra's features, but she didn't pull away. She only laid a hand on his shoulder. Returning a kiss she had given him before, Noah kissed her cheek this time, a small, satisfied sound escaping him. Chapter 483. Think, cough, cough, Lysandra. I'm headed out first. I need to test this new world rune. Send me Tony's position and the others' locations later. Noah pecked Lysandra's smooth, delicate cheek, gave a quick farewell, and used teleport to leave the cultivation room. Lysandra watched him go, raising a hand to the spot on her face where he had kissed her. A faint smile touched her lips. Miles high above, Noah found himself surrounded by a thick sea of clouds, layers of white spreading like an ocean or a field of pure silk. He hovered and then blew a soft pulse of magic at the cloud beneath his feet. The blue energy sank into the mist. The clouds absorbed it and slowly compacted, becoming dense and bouncy like enormous cotton candy, an elastic white trampoline. Noah relaxed and lay back on the newly solidified cloud. As his back met the surface, the cloud sagged, enveloping part of him, then rebounded. He should have sunk. After all, He had integrated the massive stone man into his body during the last summon, and his effective mass ought to be terrifying. But he hadn't. He had adjusted the flow of his power, and now he felt light enough to rest on the cloud without sinking. It sounded unscientific. How could internal power management change such a monstrous weight? But that was the nature of runes, beyond conventional science, mysterious and absolute in their effects. Noah exhaled slowly and watched the sun's brilliance. Up here, the air was thinner and brighter, but it didn't bother him. Today had been one of the best since he recovered his memories. He'd neutralized a massive threat hidden in the earth and completed an A-level task. He'd performed 2 consecutive 10 summons, each time calling forth powerful heroes, and had even pulled a world rune from a treasure chest. The Resolve rune had immeasurably helped him since its discovery, granting him a touch of eternity, continuously strengthening his magic and body, and allowing him to temporarily break his limits like some wartime surge. If Resolve was this potent, the Overlord rune, of the same tier, must be even more violent and destructive. But more than power, what delighted him most was his growing closeness with Lysandra. Noah had been a virgin across 2 lifetimes. Relationships with women had always felt distant and bewildering. Creating a body for Lysandra and summoning Gwen had made those 2 celestial heroines a part of his life, and he'd developed a particular affection for them, Gwen's delicate charm and Lysandra's cool intellect both pulling at him. He'd never known how to move things beyond that, and today had been his first real attempt. Lysandra, summoned by him, already had a special fondness for him, but Noah wanted more. He wanted to openly express his feelings and deepen what they had. He pictured a future where the 3 of them stayed together in the Marvel Universe, their bonds growing stronger. He tapped his cheeks. Fantasizing wouldn't get him there. He needed to get stronger and work harder. While Noah was musing, Lysandra had already sent the location data he'd requested, Tony and the others' positions. Noah pressed his belt, and a holographic projection unfolded in the air, showing scattered markers and live feeds. Tony and the others were busy besieging deviant sites across the world. The Eternals, some mages from Camartage, and Banner were all involved. For the Eternals, it was their ageless duty. They'd done this for millennia and were unerringly efficient. Many of the Camartage mages had volunteered after the Ancient One briefed them. They were human and felt compelled to remove alien threats. A few mages preferred to stay out of direct combat and limited themselves to opening teleportation portals. Tony had been eager to move earlier. Besieging deviants gave him plenty of research opportunities, so he was happy to travel the globe chasing them. Banner had joined him, not as a bystander, but as a frontline fighter. He'd been shifting into the Hulk form and fighting alongside Tony. After his last decisive step, transforming proactively in the desert, Banner had felt the knot in his chest loosen. He could sense the Hulk more clearly now, almost communicate with it, and under Betty's long-term encouragement, he'd been attempting the change more often. Noah scrolled through the hologram, noting the teams and hotspots. He'd planned to go down into the Earth's core afterward to deal with the nascent Celestials, but first, let's go to them and test the rune's power. Chapter 484, The Power of Electrocution. Let's go see how Tony and the others are doing, and test the power of the Overlord rune while we're at it. Mr. Noah glanced at the location markers for Tony and the Eternal, then decided to go to Tony's side first to check on him and Banner. Killing these deviants with the Overlord rune would be overkill, but Noah's main goal was to familiarize himself with the rune and test its capabilities. He figured the Overlord rune might be like the Resolve rune, composed of smaller rune abilities from the game's rune page, things like Grasp of Immortality or Resurrection Wind. These deviants would make perfect targets for experimentation. After confirming Tony's location, Noah settled back on his white cloud. With one hand, he opened a blue teleportation portal and hooked a finger to draw it toward him. The portal flew horizontally through the air, swallowing clouds as it went. Noah lay half-reclined on the cloud bed and waited for the portal to engulf him. Once it did, the portal contracted and vanished. The cloud still looked solid and floating, though without the magic it would soon revert to an ordinary cloud. The portal deposited Noah in a place he didn't recognize, a desolate mountain range in California. Dry earth and sparse tufts of grass stretched everywhere, with no sign of human habitation. It was the kind of place where even animals struggled to survive. Boom, boom, boom. Despite the barren landscape, thunderous impacts echoed continuously. Ahead, a figure in an Iron Man suit and a massive green shape were fighting three enormous, terrifying monsters with two horns, long limbs, and writhing tentacles. The clashes kicked up yellow dust and sand, reducing visibility to almost nothing. A flash of white suddenly appeared in that dusty haze, Noah's cloud as it materialized out of the portal. When he stepped out, a mouthful of grit hit him. He frowned, raised his hand, and made his finger into a sword. A gust of wind howled out and swept the yellow dust aside. The battlefield came into focus. Tony, in destroyer armor, and Hulk, Bruce Banner transformed, were fighting in perfect coordination, forcing the three deviants to give ground. From their shapes, Noah guessed the deviants might be modeled after antelopes or similar animals. Nearby stood another figure, a Kamartaj sorcerer in traditional robes, a middle-aged Caucasian man with curly blonde hair. He had been the one who opened the teleportation portal for Tony and Banner. As the dust cleared, the sorcerer noticed the sudden white cloud and Noah's arrival. He immediately grew wary, uncertain whether this newcomer was friend or foe. But when he recognized Noah's face, his guard relaxed and he walked up to him. "Hello, Mr. Noah," the sorcerer said. Noah blinked. He hadn't expected this man to know him, though it was convenient, no need for introductions. "My name is Yahya," the sorcerer explained, bowing. "Sorcerer Ancient One sent me to assist Mr. Stark and the Green Gentleman in eliminating those monsters." Yahya had seen Noah conversing with the Ancient One in Kamartaj before, and had been told that Noah was a distinguished guest, hence the recognition. Noah nodded and glanced back at the ongoing fight. The battlefield showed little long-term destruction, which told him the fight hadn't been going on very long. With Hulk and destroyer armor involved, prolonged combat would have torn up the ground. Perched on his cloud, Noah produced the Overlord rune. To Yahya, it appeared as a red, trident-like object conjured out of thin air. The sorcerer felt a sudden, inexplicable craving for it, a small, hungry tug in his chest. Noah noticed the change in Yahya's expression, but had anticipated this. He had dampened the rune's alluring pull as soon as he took it out, aware that having others present could be dangerous. Yahya's reaction was only mild. Once the rune vanished, the craving would disappear entirely. Noah held the rune with one hand and reached forward with the other. The Overlord rune flared with brilliant red light. A bolt of red destroyer lightning descended from the sky, split into three, and struck the three deviants directly. Chapter 485. Tony, you killed the boss solo? Crackle, crackle, crackle. Boom, boom, boom. First came the sizzle of surging electricity, then a thunderous roar. Three dazzling red bolts stabbed down from the sky and struck three massive deviants. Tony and Banner, charging toward them, froze as the lightning hit. It smashed into the deviants' plated hides, and to their shock, the creature's normally tank-like skin disintegrated like tissue paper. Dense muscle and knotted bone vaporized under the crimson energy as if an invisible fire consumed them. This red lightning wasn't ordinary high-temperature electricity. It was a materialized destructive force shaped like lightning. Against it, the deviants had no way to resist. Their existence became instantly negligible. The three deviants dissolved under the bombardment and dissipated into the air, leaving not so much as a skeleton behind. What the hell? Where did that lightning come from? And why is it red? Tony shouted. He'd been swooping in toward the deviants, then slammed down to the ground when the bolts hit. His landing carved two deep furrows into the earth. When he rose, the creatures he and Banner had been fighting were gone. He scanned the sky. There were no storm clouds, and even if there were, red lightning like that wouldn't come from them. Hulk's roar echoed from behind Tony. It didn't sound like a battle yell so much as a greeting. Everything Hulk said came out as a roar, given how loud he was. Tony turned the way Hulk had roared and spotted a figure standing next to the wizard who'd brought them here earlier. "Noah?" Tony called, surprised, then fired jets from his boots and flew over. When he landed beside Noah, Tony noticed something odd under him, a lump of white hovering like a little cloud. Jarvis's sensors confirmed it was a cloud, but common sense balked. Clouds don't sit on the ground, and people don't perch on them. This is a new species I brought back from the sky, a magic white cloud, Noah said with a smile, then hopped down from the marshmallow soft puff. A new species? Tony muttered, baffled. Before he could tease him, the cloud under Noah sprouted 4 vague limbs and lunged at Tony like a living thing. What? Tony started to step back, and the cloud wrapped around him for a moment. He panicked, gesturing wildly to dispel it. Fortunately, it clung only briefly, lost whatever bite it had, and relaxed into an ordinary cloud again, slowly drifting upward. Noah, seriously, what was that? Tony checked his destroyer armor. It hadn't taken any damage from the strange cloud. He looked up with a half grin. No, I was joking, Noah said. It was just a normal cloud. You really are something, Tony said, speechless for a beat, then moved on. Why are you here? Did something happen? No big deal. I came to test a new power I just obtained. Noah toyed with a red trident-shaped crystal in his hand, a small, jagged object that pulsed faintly. At this point, he still had to hold the Overlord rune physically to use it. When his connection to it wasn't deep, wielding it like a weapon felt natural. Compared to the Resolve rune, which mainly strengthened him on the inside, the Overlord rune felt more like a weapon, a tool to release destructive force and amplify destructive capability. It would boost Noah as well, but its primary function was offensive. Using it in his hand seemed to fit. Power? You mean that red lightning just now? Tony asked, noticing the trident-shaped object. Oh, there's one other thing I almost forgot, Noah said, voice going quiet for a second. The threat in the Earth's core has been resolved by me. We don't have to worry about the planet being ripped open by some colossal giant. Noah had almost forgotten he'd done it himself. After killing the Celestials, everything that followed had been so eventful that the core incident faded in his memory. He'd also absorbed 2 segments of memories from Heroes, which pushed that episode further back. Tony's face went numb. A rush of thoughts churned through him. Wait, Noah, are you saying you took care of whatever was inside Earth's core? Tony demanded. Hulk dropped down onto the hill behind them with a heavy thud, having leapt over from wherever he'd landed when he didn't find any more enemies. He wanted to join them but stood silently, waiting. Yes, Noah said. I dealt with the Celestial that was down there, but there are bigger problems ahead. Elder Celestials, far more powerful, will be next. Tony stared at him, the implications settling in. The brief, bright silence that followed was filled with the distant creak of a world that had just been a little less threatening, and with the heavy realization that the war was far from over. Chapter 486, The Aftermath of the Battle at the Center of the Earth. Didn't you say you were only going down to check things out today? How did you wrap it up so fast? Tony asked, still trying to process the explosive news Noah had just dropped. Earlier, Tony and Banner had been discussing plans with Noah. They wanted to eliminate more deviants, ideally gather them together and destroy them in one final strike, but taking out as many as possible beforehand would improve their odds. That was Tony and Banner's idea. Noah hadn't seemed particularly invested. He'd said he didn't care much how many deviants there were, but he wouldn't refuse help if someone offered. Noah had told them he intended to penetrate the Earth's core to investigate the creature said to be capable of destroying the planet. Tony and Banner were curious how he planned to do that. Noah said he'd use magic, but didn't elaborate. What surprised Tony was that Noah had said he was only investigating. Yet when he returned, he reported the problem already solved. Hadn't Noah said that thing was as big as the Earth? Even if it was an embryo, measured by human scale, it would be continent-sized. Why was it gone? Why had there no further movement? Yes, I did say I was just going to check things out, Noah replied calmly. But sometimes things develop faster than expected. After I saw that Celestial Group embryo, I wanted to test its defenses, he continued. If I could neutralize it on the spot, that would be ideal. Its reaction was extreme. It panicked when it noticed me and tried to emerge prematurely. I couldn't let that happen. It would have produced too much disturbance, so I had to move it somewhere else. Noah recounted the events beneath the surface for Tony. Behind Tony, the Hulk, seeing no immediate threat, yawned and slowly contracted back into Banner. They'd come a long way. Where Banner had once loathed the Hulk, and the Hulk had returned the dislike in kind. Something had shifted. Banner's emotional breakthrough had loosened the knot between them. They could transform freely now. Banner smoothly put his jacket back on after reverting. Noah noticed the quiet mutual ease between them and felt a little curious. Oh, right. Noah noticed Banner dressing and then looked at Tony, who was still mulling over what Noah had said. Tony, during all that, did anything happen on the surface? Any disasters or unusual events? Noah remembered disturbing the outer layers of the core during the fight and worried that the crust might have reacted. Tony called Jarvis and asked for a status update. There were a couple of anomalous events, Jarvis reported. An unpredicted earthquake struck in Israel, and near the Pacific coast of Japan, there was a tsunami, also without warning. Experts worldwide are actively debating the causes. Oh, Noah, did you cause that? Tony asked, eyes narrowing. No, Noah said. It was the celestial group's attempt to impact the mantle. Their size and movements were enormous. Even small shifts at that depth can trigger crustal activity. That's why I wanted to know what the surface was experiencing. Lyssandra's voice chimed in, filling in the details Noah had asked for, exactly what damage and losses had occurred in the two regions Tony had mentioned. Noah, you're glad it hit those places? Tony said, catching the note of relief in Noah's voice. Noah shrugged. I don't have any particular fondness for that island nation, and I'm not sympathetic towards certain fanatical groups there, he said carefully. And I have personal reasons for being bitter about what's happened in the other region. In my previous life, I saw some things I can't forget. All told, I'm grateful the biggest impacts were isolated to those areas. Tony accepted that. Everyone had private histories and grudges. He wasn't about to police Noah's feelings. He had his own low opinion of ideological extremism, after all. What island nation? What earthquake? Banner asked, rubbing his head as he wandered over, still slightly dazed. Oh, hey, Noah. He greeted him when he saw him. Noah nodded in return. What are you two talking about? Noah said he dealt with the celestial group in the Earth's core, Tony summarized. Banner's reaction was a mix of incredulity and awe. What? Noah, having answered their questions, was already thinking ahead. The Overlord rune still had functions he hadn't tested, abilities that needed real-world experimentation. He had more places to visit, more anomalies to probe. After Tony finished explaining the surface reports to Banner, he turned to look for Noah and found the space beside him empty. Where did he go? Tony asked, scanning the room. Chapter 487, A Stinking Place with Disgusting Monsters. In the game, the Overlord rune's keystones included Electrocute, Dark Seal, Predator, Hail of Blades, and several smaller runes. Game mechanics and reality weren't the same thing, but Noah had learned from the Resolve rune that there was a connection between the two. He planned to test the Overlord rune's powers using what he'd learned in-game. He had already tried Electrocute, and its destructive force was enormous. Noah also realized something important. The red lightning produced by Electrocute wasn't ordinary earthly lightning. It was the Overlord rune's most destructive force manifesting as lightning, an elemental expression of the rune's power that incinerated anything it struck. The 3 bolts he'd released before had been only a tiny test, a slight draw on the rune's reserves. When the Overlord rune used Electrocute, it absorbed Noah's mana and converted it into those crimson bolts. The rune itself possessed vast magical reserves, almost limitless in the same way the Resolve rune was. The difference was familiarity. Noah couldn't easily tap the Resolve rune's depths because it didn't know him well yet, but the Overlord rune obliged him readily, answering his calls for power. From the amount of magic that transformed into lightning, Noah knew the rune's conversion efficiency was staggering, far beyond what his electrocution blade could manage. His small personal ability might soon be obsolete beside the Overlord rune. The Overlord rune's power wasn't limited to Electrocute. Noah intended to test its other functions next. For now, he arrived at a new location. He'd been talking with Tony and Banner in the wilderness. Then, after giving Tony some information about the Celestials and seeing them start a heated discussion, Noah used the Space Stone to leave and teleport to the coordinates Lysandra had given him. He targeted the spot where the Eternal team was operating. Looking down, Noah frowned and brought up the projection map on his waist. The coordinates read India. The reason he'd immediately thought India was obvious. Below him, enormous piles of garbage rose like small mountains, stinking of rot and decay in a way that punched even the air 1,000 meters up. The odor reached him despite the height. He glanced at nearby villages in the adjacent city and wondered how the people there tolerated it. He also saw something absurd. The Eternals were fighting deviants not far from habitations, and a group of local villagers were gathered, standing or squatting around the garbage heaps, staring intently. Why would they watch a battle from so close? Noah realized the reason at a closer look. The Eternal team had no personnel responsible for concealment. The non-combatants who usually handled these situations, the druid and the sprite, were absent. Only primary fighters were on the mission: the powerhouse Gilgamesh, the Valkyrie Thena, Kingo, the speedster Makari, and the healer Ajak. Without the druid to weave illusions and the sprite to manipulate minds, the Eternals didn't bother masking the fight, and so curious villagers had noticed. The deviants they were opposing were especially repulsive. Hyena-like creatures so grotesque, Noah felt a physical recoil. They oozed tentacles that constantly secreted a viscous slime. Their skin bristled with pustules and pitted with dense holes from which writhing maggots spilled. Noah imagined they must have slept for centuries beneath the landfill before the rubbish was dumped there, and the filth had warped them into these abominations. He couldn't bear to look for long. His vision was sharp enough to pick out pores on ordinary people's faces, so the sight of such rot made him queasy. It wasn't that mortal beauty ever held his interest, only Lysandra and Gwen at home merited that. This was purely disgust. He felt the urge to purge this filth. His hand tightened around the Overlord rune. He fed mana into it again, and a deep red energy flowed back, washing over him. The blood-colored aura wrapped him like a cloak of flame. As the rune's power enveloped him, his mind slid toward a fierce clarity, a single inclination rising above all else, the desire to find an enemy and fight. Chapter 488, True Damage Flame. Noah had just activated Predator, the keystone rune power of the Overlord rune. In the game, Predator grants acceleration and bonus damage when you move toward nearby enemies. In reality, when Noah gripped the Overlord rune and thought of the Predator effect, the rune's power flowed into him. An intoxicating force suffused his body. He felt stronger, hungrier, keyed to hunt. His gaze swept over the Indian civilians hidden below and the standing Eternal, and finally fixed on his real quarry, the disgusting deviants. Filth, Noah snarled. His features twisted with fury as his energy cloak flared hotter, then he dove like a blazing meteor. The Eternal fighting below didn't notice at first. Only Makari saw the anomaly in the sky. Though deaf and mute, she'd seen the sudden burst of red flame, and unable to shout a warning, she tapped each teammate on the shoulder to look up. Because she was quick, everyone who received her signal managed to dodge before the burning meteor struck. Boom! The falling red meteor slammed into one of the deviants. As it neared the ground, the red flames detonated and the crimson fire fanned outward, consuming everything in its path. Under that destructive blaze, matter vanished. Deviant and the mountains of garbage beneath it alike were incinerated so completely that no smoke remained. Noah, at the center of the inferno, calmed the frenzy in his mind and slowly rose to his feet. Where the heap of filth had once blocked the sun, scorched ground now appeared. The soil underneath was long fouled by trash and toxins, and Noah deliberately kept the flames focused on burning the filth, sparing the earth itself. That was why he could stand on solid ground instead of in a crater. The Overlord rune didn't directly grant fire, but it amplified Noah's magic. When he activated Predator and channeled fire magic, one of the simple spells he had learned at Kamar Taj, the rune magnified it into something far deadlier. The flames felt like a summoner spell's true damage, burning as if able to annihilate anything in the world. One of the Overlord rune's traits is the ability to trigger true damage, so the fire Noah produced under its enhancement resembled the deadly ignite. The flames kept spreading with relentless heat. The Eternal quickly backed away to a safe distance, but the deviants hadn't seen it coming. One was obliterated at the blast's center. The others panicked and shrieked, tentacles bristling like frightened fur as they tried to flee. Just as they turned to escape the inferno, 3 fire dragons erupted from the rolling blaze. beasts born of the conflagration, roaring as they shot toward the remaining deviants. There was no match. The deviants couldn't outrun the dragons. Screaming, they were engulfed. The mucus and water on their bodies vaporized. The maggots turned into shriveled corpses, and in the next instant, those dried remains were reduced to gin. Not a single molecule left in this world. The Eternals stared at one another, stunned. Is this fire from hell? If we touched it, would we end up like those disgusting things? Kingo said, staring at the burning air. Even from a distance, the heat made him shiver. Be careful. It might be an enemy, Gilgamesh warned, taking a defensive stance. He'd seen the flames become dragons, an obviously controlled phenomenon, but he didn't know whether the wielder was friend or foe. Under the Eternals' wary eyes, the blaze finally began to subside. When the heat waves faded, the garbage mountain they'd been fighting around was gone, incinerated down to scorched earth. The foul odor seemed cleared too, at least for now. Kingo, who had lived in India long enough to know the reality, added, "That won't last. The stench will come back from the nearby dumps. This place will fill with trash again soon." Their immediate concern, however, was the figure standing at the center of the heat. Even with the light warped by the remaining thermal waves, they could make out someone emerging from where the flames had been. "Look, there's a person there. It looks like he released those flames," someone called. "He's coming toward us. Be careful." Chapter 489, The Eternals and the Celestials. "He's coming toward us. Be careful," Gilgamesh shouted, eyes fixed on the figure that had materialized when the flames died down and now strode straight for them. He clenched his fists and his golden energy gauntlets solidified. This being's allegiance was unknown. After the terrifying blaze earlier, Gilgamesh wanted to stay on edge. "Wait, that looks familiar." Tina, standing beside him, reached out and stopped Gilgamesh before he could act. The heat had warped the air and light, hiding the newcomer's face, but something about the figure stirred recognition in her. She held Gilgamesh back to get a better look. "You think we know him?" Gilgamesh lowered his arm, puzzled. They didn't know many people on Earth. Most had died long ago. Then a thought clicked. Apart from their own kind, only one of their acquaintances could emit that level of power. "Noah?" Gilgamesh asked, craning his neck to make out the other's face. "It should be," Tina said, confident. As the figure drew closer, the Eternals finally saw who it was, their human friend Noah. Kingo, standing nearby, exhaled in relief. He had assumed the man who'd fallen from the sky was an enemy, and after the earlier attack, facing a stranger like that would have been terrifying. Noah stepped out of the scorched area toward the higher ground where the Eternals stood. Their previous fight had taken place on a massive pile of trash and scrap. Once the burning pile where Noah's flames had erupted was incinerated, the remaining heaps became the elevated ground. Noah no longer walked slowly. He stomped and then appeared before them in an instant. "Hello, everyone." Noah nodded, and they greeted him back. Makari made a questioning sign in sign language. Ajak stepped forward from behind the others and studied Noah with a look that was equal parts surprise and complexity. Did she already know something? Noah's mission in meeting the Eternals had been twofold: to test the power of the Overlord rune and to warn them about the Celestials. Ajak's expression suggested she might already know more than she let on. "Noah, did you kill my Lord Tiamat?" Ajak asked, her voice heavy. Noah nodded. "Yes. That Celestial has been eliminated by me. Earth's immediate crisis is resolved. But you should know a greater danger still lies ahead." Ajak's eyes trembled. It was the first time in millions of years she had witnessed a Celestial's fall. Godlike beings could be slain. The other Eternals behind her showed shocked expressions as well. They had heard the name Tiamat when Ajak had briefed them about their mission. Now, to learn that a human, their friend, had killed a Celestial stunned them. "How did you know before I told you?" Noah asked. Ajak's face had shifted through several emotions when he spoke. Finally, she steadied herself and explained. "Not long ago, we were on a mission to hunt deviants in another region," she said. "In the middle of battle, we all felt a surge of power within us. Our abilities were suddenly amplified." She paused as the others fell silent, listening. "At that moment, I suspected a Celestial had manifested. When the Celestial were meant to protect appears, we Eternals link with it. Its vast power strengthens us. That's why many of us can survive through missions even after a planet is devastated. Ajak's gaze swept over them. So when our powers spiked, Gilgamesh and the others were able to quickly cut down the deviants they were fighting. But even knowing a celestial was awakening, we couldn't intervene in your battlefield. We didn't know where it was. I decided to use that window of enhanced power to eliminate as many deviants as possible. Kingo looked down at his hands. No wonder I felt 10 times stronger for a bit, he muttered. His energy blasts had felt massively amplified, but the boost had been fleeting. That's why you appeared here, Noah said, nodding. Ajak's explanation fit with what he had observed in the field. The Eternals had sensed the Celestials' rise and been temporarily empowered. They had used that chance to clear deviants where they could. Now they were here, in the aftermath, and learning the rest of the truth. Chapter 490, Ajak's Concerns. So that's how it is. Noah nodded as he listened. There really was a connection between the Eternals and the Celestials. That explained why the Celestials had been able to tap the Eternals' power on Earth earlier. They could establish an energy link and augment one another. But why did you engage the deviants so close to towns and villages? Didn't we agree the battlefield shouldn't be chosen near populated places? Noah asked. When he, Tony, and the others first developed the detector, they decided to focus on deviants whose routes crossed populated areas. Lyssandra's algorithm would flag those deviants, and they'd intercept them before they reached people. The Eternals' current battle site, however, was uncomfortably close to a village. Noah suspected the nearby city might already have noticed the disturbance. Ajak could only shake her head and smile helplessly. We didn't want that either. After our powers strengthened, we decided to take advantage of the surge and clear out as many deviants as we could. We asked Lysandra to send us the coordinates of a nearby deviant. It was about 10 kilometers from this city. We went to that spot. There were almost no civilians, so it seemed safe. But after we started fighting, our power suddenly flickered out. I thought it must have been you, Noah, that you'd eliminated the Celestials and the link between us and them broke. The power amplification vanished with it. Because of that, we lost the chance to finish off those deviants. They'd been startled by the power we displayed earlier and took off running. Ajak recounted the rest. With the Celestials eliminated, their temporary boost disappeared, and the deviants escaped. Normally, Makari would have intercepted every fleeing deviant, but the terrain here restricted us. These creatures burrowed into the garbage heaps and fled through those trash mounds. Makari couldn't pursue them effectively. Noah remembered how grotesque those deviants were. The filth and refuse suited them perfectly. He suspected Makari's reluctance to dive into the muck made interception difficult. In the end, we only managed to stop them when they were almost at the edge of the garbage mountain, near the village, Ajak finished. So that's why. Noah nodded, then gestured toward the group of villagers watching from a distance. They hadn't fled. Some were even snapping pictures with their phones during the fight. Noah quietly told Lysandra to delete the photos from their devices. It's nothing. They're my fans. They thought we were shooting a film, Kingo called, stepping forward. He'd been living in India for a while and had already ingratiated himself with the locals. Noah glanced at the crowd, incredulous for a moment at the idea that anyone would mistake rampaging monsters for a movie. Still, he reminded himself the people were probably from nearby rural areas. It wasn't impossible, they lacked the context to understand what they'd just seen. All right, you should go back now. Authorities will be here soon, and they won't be fooled so easily. The red flames that had shot into the sky earlier were visible from the city. Something would come to investigate. Noah intended to leave as well. He hadn't forgotten his primary reason for being here, to test the Overlord rune. He'd already tried out the Predator's power, and it had been formidable. Telling Ajak about the Celestials had been incidental. Wait, Noah. Ajak called after him, sensing he was ready to depart. He paused, the surge of spatial energy inside him slowing as he turned. Is there something else? Ajak hesitated, then asked plainly, Noah, when you kill Tiamat, what you'll face is a fully powered Celestial, Arisham the Judge. Are you truly ready to face that? Even though Noah had dealt with Tiamat, that was an immature Celestial. Ajak understood the gulf between that and a full celestial like Arisham, and she was worried about what was coming next. No, Noah said lightly, then corrected the tone with a small smile. Of course I won't be unprepared. When the Celestials come, we'll work with Kamartaj to keep Earth safe. He wasn't certain how many Celestials might appear, but he doubted Arisham would bring an entire horde down on him at once. In a one-on-one, Noah felt confident he could hold his own. If it became a group fight, he had the Infinity Stones as a trump card. In his Darkstar Thresh form, he could fully wield the stone's power. As the most potent artifacts in the universe, they made him far less fearful of the Celestials. Ajak listened, and despite her lingering doubts, she chose to believe him. There was nothing the Eternals could do to help directly. Joining Noah would be a suicide mission. The best support they could offer was to protect Earth as it could when Noah faced the Celestials, so he wouldn't have to worry about anything else. Chapter 491, Banning Eternals from Kamartaj. All right, you guys carry on. I'm leaving. Noah didn't linger after speaking. The spatial power inside him surged. A teleportation portal blinked into existence beneath him, and he slipped through. The blue gateway collapsed the instant his figure vanished. I envy him so much. He can come and go anywhere like that. I wish I could learn teleportation. Kingo watched the spot where Noah had been and said with a sigh. He admired Noah's casual coolness and the terrifying fire he'd displayed earlier. Like several other Eternals who had tried Kamartaj's teleportation, Kingo had wanted to learn it himself. It felt cinematic and reckless in all the right ways. If he'd seen the sorcerer who'd opened the portal for them at that moment, though, he would have understood why Noah's display had impressed everyone so much. The sorcerer's eyes had gone wide, first at Noah's fire, and then at his ability to open a teleportation gateway without a suspension ring or any hand gestures. It wasn't just cool, it was beyond what a Kamartaj sorcerer normally managed. Still, Kingo's dream of joining Kamartaj died quickly. It wasn't that Kamartaj would have refused him. They took in plenty of applicants, and Kingo hadn't come with dark motives. He wasn't ill or ascetic or desperate. He simply wanted to learn magic. The sorcerers could see he wasn't malicious and that he had some talent, so they would have accepted him. The one who stopped it was Ajak. Ajak didn't want the Eternals to join Kamartaj. She understood more of the truth about those sorcerers than the others did, specifically where their power came from. Years earlier, when she first encountered Kamartaj, she had tried to learn about the mysterious order and even discussed it with Arisham the judge. At that point, Ajak was still trying to stay responsible for their mission. She worried Kamartaj might be a danger to what the Eternals were meant to do. Arisham had told her the sorcerer's strength didn't come from nowhere, but from a powerful extra-dimensional entity, a dimensional demon, called Vishanti. The name carried weight. Ajak could hear the solemn caution in Arisham's voice. Arisham had also assured her Vishanti would not interfere with their mission, so her warning wasn't a sign that Kamartaj was inherently hostile, but it was enough. Borrowing power from an extra-dimensional being had costs. Once a sorcerer wore a suspension ring, they were linked, at least to some degree, to Vishanti. Ajak, now separated from the Celestials and wary of any new entanglements, did not want the Eternals to become tied to such an entity. For that reason, she prevented members like Kingo from joining Kamartaj, even if the sorcerers themselves would have accepted them. Okay, Kingo, deal with those civilians. We should go. With Noah gone, Ajak set aside the Celestials for the moment. There was nothing she could do to help him directly. All they could do was hope he could hold his own against Arisham and the others. Still, she believed they could be useful on Earth's rear lines. We'll have a lot to prepare when we get back, she said. They needed to return to Kamartaj and consult the Ancient One about how to arrange defenses for the time reversal spell. After putting the scene in order, the Kamartaj sorcerer opened another teleportation portal, and the Eternals left the landfill. Indian police cars trickled up a little later, officers half-interested, herding away gawkers with batons before lifting the metal sheet covering the hole in the garbage heap to inspect. A fire truck arrived too, but the blaze everyone remembered seeing had vanished. People looked around in confusion. The fire had been there, hadn't it? Where had it gone? They never got answers. A black business van rolled up and a squad of people in black suits stepped out and took control. Assailed, and the scene fell under their jurisdiction. Noah, meanwhile, ascended into the sky. He wasn't above India now. Following coordinates Lysandra had given him, he'd arrived in a region occupied by deviants. A smaller, less agitated pack ran below him. No pursuers, no chaos, the perfect test subjects. He had one keystone rune left from the game, Dark Harvest, and he planned to use these deviants for the final experiment. Chapter 492, Dark Harvest. Noah had already tested 3 of the 4 keystone powers of the Overlord rune in the game, Electrocute, Predator, and Hail of Blades. He had even tried using the Overlord rune's power in reality with those 3, leaving only the last one, Dark Harvest, untested. In fact, he'd already triggered Hail of Blades once while using Predator just moments ago. Back then, his emotions were running wild. During his descent, he had impulsively activated the Overlord rune and burned the deviants to ash with fire, which kept him from demonstrating Hail of Blades properly. In the game, Hail of Blades grants a huge attack speed boost for the first 3 hits against an enemy hero. In reality, it manifests as a brief but powerful enhancement to his body, greatly increasing his speed and strength. But because the enemies had vanished by the time he landed, he couldn't show what it truly could do. By now, Noah could feel the Overlord rune's power. The 3 abilities he'd already used were all massive combat amplifiers, battle-changing in effect. Unlike the Resolve rune, the Overlord rune was built for combat and destruction. The last ability left to test was Dark Harvest. In the game, Dark Harvest deals extra damage to enemies below 50% health and reaps their souls to increase its potency. That soul-stealing aspect reminded Noah of the Book of Murder he had recently synthesized, Magi's Soul Stealer, and of his soul-stealing scroll. He wondered whether Dark Harvest would interact with those items. He decided to test Dark Harvest first, then check for any special linkage with the soul-stealing scroll. Noah descended again. This time, he didn't bring fire with him. He didn't want to annihilate the deviants too quickly. He landed directly in the midst of the group with a thud. The sudden arrival startled the deviants, and they began to roar, but Noah barely had time to take them in. He thrust out his hand. Humph! A burst of cold erupted from him. Frost magic flowed outward in a white mist, sweeping the ground. Under its influence, countless massive ice spikes erupted from the earth like bamboo shoots after rain, tips glittering coldly in the light. The creatures weren't impaled, though. Instead, the mist crystallized around them, and each was encased in a larger, solid block of ice. Their faces were frozen in the moment they had seen Noah, pressed behind crystal-clear, nearly unbreakable panes. Only then did Noah get a good look at the deviants. Their forms were bizarre, but shared common traits. Tentacles on their bodies, used for sucking energy or flesh and for striking, no fur, muscle fibers exposed. They resembled large, hairless gorillas. Their forelimbs were far thicker than their hind limbs, which explained their slow movement. Well, at least these were better than the hyena-like deviants he'd seen in India. Now immobilized in ice, they were helpless, perfect for testing. They should have souls, right? Noah muttered. Deviants were living creatures. They should. But he would know for sure once he tried. He targeted one of the frozen blocks and poured magic in. Inside the white, hard ice, razor-like spikes sprouted and tore into the deviant's body. He was deliberately inflicting grievous wounds. In the game, Dark Harvest only triggers on enemies below half health, and he didn't know how the threshold translated to reality. Overlord rune. Reap its soul. Noah held up the rune and pointed it at the mutilated creature. The rune drank a trace of his magic and flared red. For a moment he thought he heard an invisible scream. From the riddled corpse, a red light pulsed, and a translucent shadow shaped like the deviant was drawn out on a beam of blood-red energy. Noah pictured a red, hooded death figure carrying a scythe. The Dark Harvest icon from the game flashed in his mind. The Overlord rune forcibly pulled the deviant's soul from its body. As it left, the soul was shredded and assimilated into a red soul essence by the rune's power. Noah felt that red energy surge into him. A warm, exquisite sensation washed through his soul. It felt deeply satisfied. This red soul energy was different from the soul power he'd absorbed before via the Dark Seal or the soul-stealing scroll. It carried the Overlord rune's signature, an extra layer of destructive power, so it enhanced him more profoundly than ordinary soul energy. Noah tilted his head and exhaled. He felt a little flustered. This was the first time he'd absorbed this particular force, but the feeling was familiar. The first time he'd used Darkseal to take a soul had produced a similar reaction. He'd get used to it. Chapter 493, Soul Stealer Scroll Enhancement. The power of Dark Harvest is enormous. It feels far stronger than the soul-stealing scroll. It can rip a soul out of a body without any condition like being below half health. After the pleasant aftertaste faded, Noah turned his attention back to the Overlord rune in his hand and considered the Dark Harvest ability. In the game, Dark Harvest required the hero to be below 50% health to trigger, so Noah had tested it by driving the frozen test subject nearly to death with ice spikes. But in reality, the 50% trigger simply didn't exist. The rune's power could strip a soul straight out of a body with no prerequisites. Of course, against a stronger opponent, you might need to weaken their resistance first before you could pull their soul free. Perhaps the 50% requirement in the game had been a crude way to represent that. After experiencing Dark Harvest, Noah wondered if its effect overlapped with the soul-stealing scroll. Both absorbed souls and fed on them. The Overlord rune's effect even seemed superior. Could the rune replace the scroll? He dismissed the idea after a moment. The scroll had different capabilities. It didn't merely absorb soul energy, it could enslave a soul and make it his. The Overlord rune lacked that. In the game, the Overlord rune could turn an enemy's residual power into a zombie guard after a kill, not a full zombie, but more like a reconnaissance sentinel. Each had its strengths. Dark Harvest couldn't fully supplant the soul-stealing scroll. Buzz. As Noah pondered, the soul-stealing scroll, reduced to the size of a bracelet charm, suddenly pulsed with soul energy. Noah felt it calling and restored it to full size to see what it wanted. Once he reactivated his whimsy magic, the thumb-sized trinket swelled into a red-covered book about 30 centimeters on a side. The ice crystal bracelet chained to it did not grow. It stayed the same, dangling from the book's edge. Buzz. When the scroll returned to normal, a faint white light flickered across its surface, and a thought slipped into Noah's mind through soul communication. You mean, the rune in your hand can make me stronger? Noah decoded the message instantly. The scroll had felt the soul-harvesting power of the Overlord rune and suspected that power could enhance it. It offered the idea but didn't ask him to do anything, just presented the possibility. You really are a homebody, aren't you? Noah said, tapping the book's cover with a smile. Since the scroll had suggested it might be strengthened, he decided to try to make that possibility real. The power of Dark Harvest combined with the soul-stealing scroll. He held the Overlord rune in one hand and the scroll in the other, and considered how to merge them. After a moment, he tried the simplest approach, directly infuse the scroll with the rune's power. The Overlord rune rotated slightly, drawing some of Noah's magic. Red energy streaked from its surface and surged toward the scroll. The red clusters smacked against the book's cover and flowed straight inside. The scroll's surface flushed red and faint currents ran across it. Noah controlled his magic and flipped the pages, looking for specific changes. The first page revealed an immediate difference. What had been a blank margin now sported a red pattern along the edge, a visible trace of the Overlord rune's power. Noah stopped channeling the rune. The pattern didn't fade, it remained. That meant the change was permanent. Normally, whether using the Resolve rune or the Overlord rune to strengthen a weapon, one would place the item near the rune and let it absorb its magic over years. Simply pumping rune energy into an item usually produced only a temporary enhancement unless repeated often enough to accumulate. But the red pattern's permanence showed an unusually high compatibility between the Overlord rune and the soul-stealing scroll. The scroll had accepted the rune's power and gained a lasting enhancement. How do you feel? Noah asked. Buzz, buzz. The scroll's pages began to turn on their own, as if it were testing or exploring the changes within. Chapter 494, Enhanced Soul Summon, Buzz. The soul-stealing scroll chimed after a quick self-check, sending a stream of soul information to Noah. The Overlord rune's power suits you well. You've received a substantial boost. Your strength across the board has increased. Noah nodded as he absorbed the scroll's report. The soul-stealing scroll had indeed become much stronger. Its magic power, soul force, and its ability to absorb and bind souls were all enhanced by the Overlord rune. This is excellent. Satisfied, Noah was eager to test the amplified scroll. This time, he wanted to use the rune's energy to activate it and see how much better the results would be. If anything feels off, tell me, he said to the scroll, then invoked the Overlord rune and directed Dark Harvest through it. Instead of the red energy manifesting directly from the targets, the rune itself released the red energy, which Noah guided back into the soul-stealing scroll. The scroll unfurled. Pages opened and released streams of red soul energy that surged toward the two deviants trapped in the ice. The soul energy coalesced into twin red claws and lashed at the frozen enemies. The claws did no physical harm. The attack struck directly at the soul. Each swipe tore away fragments of the deviant's souls and fed them into the claws. Within a heartbeat, under the onslaught of red soul energy, the deviants inside the ice were reduced to soulless husks. Noah glanced at the scroll. New soul portraits had formed on the first page, imprints of the deviants, eternally bound to its pages. He flipped to the second page and found another soul equally imprisoned. The red claws retracted, returning the freshly harvested soul power to the scroll, and through it to Noah's own soul. Hiss! Whoa! Pleasure washed over him as the newly refined soul energy flowed into him. Noah realized that combining Dark Harvest with the soul-stealing scroll greatly improved the conversion rate. He was absorbing a purer, more potent essence than when he used either power alone. His vitality and focus surged. He shook off the pleasant haze and commanded the souls recorded on the first and second pages to manifest. Roar! The imprints flashed ruby red, and beams of light shot from the pages, striking the ground. The light solidified into two deviants, identical to the ones in the ice, but now bathed in red and crackling with crimson lightning. Empowered by the Overlord rune, the summoned souls were far stronger than their former insubstantial versions. Noah ordered them, destroy the ice and the original bodies. Roar! The two gorilla-like deviants ignored everything but his command and charged. Each was about 5 meters tall, and the ice prisons that had contained them rose 7 to 8 meters. With savage punches, each blow infused with destructive red electricity, they shattered the ice in one strike. Ice fragments flew everywhere, and the bodies inside were pulverized along with their prisons. Noah's eyes brightened. The deviant souls were significantly stronger than before. The might they displayed rivaled or even exceeded their living forms. These weren't mere summons like the hedgehog man he'd used earlier. These were fully realized soul servants created from absorbed deviant souls. One gorilla deviant alone, he realized, could easily crush more than 100 hedgehog men. He was pleased, but one thing bothered him: their appearance. They're just ugly, he muttered. Compared to other deviants, they weren't bad, but to normal human standards, they were grotesque. Tentacles, exposed muscle textures, disturbing details. Buzz! Buzz! The soul-stealing scroll responded with a faint glow. Oh, you can alter the appearances of souls recorded on your pages? Noah asked, surprised. The scroll confirmed it could, though for now the changes were cosmetic and limited in scope. It couldn't transform the basic nature of a soul. A gorilla soul couldn't become a tank, for example. Perhaps, the scroll hinted, at higher power levels it might allow cross-species conversions. Then, let's get to work. Noah gathered his soul energy and shaped it like a paintbrush. He painted across the portrait of the gorilla, erasing the revolting tentacles, covering exposed sinew with a layer of skin, and smoothing out grotesque details. He adjusted proportions and features so the creature was far more pleasing to the eye, more majestic than monstrous, a little reminiscent of the four tails from Naruto in its powerful flowing form. Satisfied, he copied the changes and pasted them onto the other deviant's portrait, overwriting its appearance as well. Much better, Noah said, nodding. The souls were now stronger, cleaner, and at least tolerable to look at. Chapter 495, Reconnaissance in Space. Hundreds of kilometers above the Earth, in the vacuum of space, Noah floated silently, eyes closed. A faint blue light shimmered around him. His hands were loosely clasped at his chest, and cradled in his palms, the blue stone hovered like a tiny star, casting its cold glow into the dark. It was, of course, the Space Stone. Noah concentrated on the stone, steering its power. Waves of spatial fluctuation pulsed outward, rippling through the void and stretching into the distant reaches of the cosmos. He was running a sweep. The stone's energy would expand as far as it could and relay back any spatial anomalies it encountered. What Noah wanted to detect most was whether anyone, specifically the Celestials, was performing a spatial jump toward the solar system. He had tested the Overlord rune and rather than return home, come straight out into space. He wasn't entirely calm about the confrontation ahead. The Celestials were about as supreme as beings got in the Marvel Universe. Each of their appearances in the films carried crushing pressure. Noah wasn't 100% sure he could beat them with the cards he had. If things went badly, he'd consider taking Lysandra and Gwen and fleeing, abandoning Earth for a while, and laying low somewhere else. If Earth was destroyed, he told himself, he could rebuild it once he'd collected all the Infinity Stones. That was a desperate contingency, one he didn't want to use if he could avoid it. So he kept scanning. The Space Stone's energy didn't teleport him across galaxies. His personal teleport range hadn't reached that yet. Instead, he sent spatial energy out to diffuse across galactic distances, exploiting space's properties to expand at superluminal speed and probe multiple galaxies. Along the way, any massive spatial disturbance would be reported back. Noah didn't want a flood of data. He only cared about one thing, a celestial-style spatial jump to Earth. He programmed the stone to report only when it detected fluctuations meeting a very high bar, at least 1,000 times the peak energy he had measured from the nascent celestial Tiamat, whom he'd fought before. He wasn't sure how powerful a fully charged celestial might be. Using Tiamat as a baseline and multiplying it by 1,000 might still be far beneath some celestials' true might, but it was enough to filter out weaker phenomena and prevent him from drowning in trivial readings. Half an hour passed without any alerts. Noah didn't know whether the Celestials were simply cloaked beyond his detection or hadn't yet arrived. It had been nearly an hour since he'd killed Tiamat. Had the others sensed the death? Could they even detect the life and death status of one of their own? The movies hadn't made that clear. In the film, after Tiamat's death, no one directly informed Ereshkigal the judge. He arrived later to judge the Eternals. So Noah entertained two possibilities. The journey to the solar system was long, even for a celestial, or something was preventing Ereshkigal from coming right away. As he maintained the sweep, Noah found he was almost enjoying the work. Each adjustment to the Space Stone deepened his attunement to it, a kind of training as much as reconnaissance. Anxiety eased. He began to think he might be overreacting. Even if a celestial did appear in Earth's outer space without warning, Ereshkigal probably wouldn't immediately annihilate the planet. More likely, he'd come to question Noah, why Tiamat was dead, where the Dark Star's power had come from, or he might try to find an Eternal for interrogation first. That possibility bought Noah time. He could still play the Dark Star card, and with the Ancient One's guarantee on the Time Stone, he had a safeguard against irreversible catastrophe. After another half hour, with nothing meeting his threshold across what amounted to nearly 10,000 light-years of scanning, Noah finally stopped. Perhaps his reporting condition had been too strict, but the lack of contacts also settled him. He gathered the blue glow into his palms, closed his eyes for a moment, and then opened a teleportation portal back to Earth. Chapter 496, Arithm's Discovery. Noah stowed the Space Stone and returned from orbit to Earth, heading straight for home. He shrank the soul-stealing scroll on his wrist back to its normal size. Lysandra was already putting the final touches on the banquet preparations, and before long, the welcome feast would officially begin. Far, far away from the solar system, so distant that even if Noah magnified his detection energy tens of millions of times, he still could not reach it. An entire galaxy had been overtaken by purple. According to the universe map, the galaxy should have been capable of supporting life, but now a strange violet haze suffused every corner of it. Purple void energy drifted through interstellar space, and even the central star had been warped. Its corona, once a familiar ring of plasma, was dyed a faint, sickly lavender, From a distance, the flaming tendrils around the sun looked like gigantic, swaying tentacles. It was no natural phenomenon. The star had clearly been polluted by an unknown influence and was shifting into something else. The source of the corruption appeared to be the galaxy's only habitable planet. The purple mist that spread outward originated there. From orbit, the planet was unrecognizable. Oceans and green continents erased, the surface a dry, blasted purple wasteland. Life on the surface had been annihilated, but in a grotesque twist, the planet had come alive in another sense. Two massive fissures split its barren skin. The upper crack trembled, then split open to reveal a huge protruding eye, twisted, malevolent, grotesque. The lower fissure yawned and exposed a maw of countless serrated teeth. A long, coiling tongue, nearly the circumference of the planet itself, slithered out. It looked like something from a Junji Ito nightmare, a living planet. If Ego, Star-Lord's father, had encountered it, he might at first mistake it for kin, but this was no celestial ego. This was a warped, forced life, the product of a powerful external corruption. From that gaping mouth poured endless purple mist, seeding the surrounding space and slowly suffusing the galaxy. This world was the planet where Thanos, already tainted by the void, had buried the void heart sculpted from Corvus Glaive's corpse. The void heart had transformed the planet. Thanos sacrificed every living thing there to forge a void star. The planet became the staging ground for Thanos' void army. The soldiers lay dormant inside the void heart, waiting silently for Thanos' order to invade the universe. But the story here is not about Thanos or his void legion. Several light years away, another presence watched this dead galaxy with grave interest. Aurelion, the judge, one of the Celestials. His six-eyed, majestic form drifted through the void as he inspected the corruption radiating from the living planet where the void energy swirled. Aurelion had been traveling toward Earth after dealing with a chaotic galaxy at the universe's edge. He had sensed the dark star energy originating from that planet. The universe is vast. Even a celestial cannot teleport across it in an instant. One of Noah's earlier guesses about why Aurelion had not yet arrived was therefore correct. Aurelion had been delayed. The reason for the delay was the purple-tainted galaxy now before him. Passing through this region, Aurelion had detected an abnormal power, the purple mist. It was unlike anything recorded in this universe, just as the dark star energy he had encountered on Earth had been foreign. Tracing the mist led him to the nearby galaxy and finally to the planet now transformed into a void star. Aurelion did not act on impulse. He observed from several light years away. His previous encounter with the unknown power on Earth had taught him that these alien energies were rarely isolated. They seemed to be backed by great entities from other universes. Acting alone against something whose origin and patron he did not understand would be reckless. He intended to gather other Celestials scattered throughout the cosmos before intervening. Whether it was the strange power displayed on Earth or this purple corruption, Aurelion sensed that both were capable of bringing disaster to the universe. It warranted attention, careful study, and the combined might of the Celestials to resolve. For good or ill, this was not a threat to be faced lightly. Chapter 497, Tiamut's Death Message. Aurelion the Judge stared at the galaxy blighted by the void, and at the most corrupt planet within it, then began sending a summons to the Celestials scattered across the universe. He had originally come intending to deal with the threat he had found among the natives of the planet called Earth. But on his way there, he had stumbled on another menace, one that could also endanger the future safety of the cosmos. The coincidence puzzled him. In the billions of years before, events like this were almost unheard of. Now 2 such crises had appeared at once. He would investigate the cause later. For now, out of caution, he would mobilize help. Aurelion released a pulse of cosmic energy laden with information. The fluctuation raced outward at unimaginable speed, propagating across the universe. Only Celestials could perceive and parse that signal. Even Ego, the sentient planet who differed from Aurelion and the others, could receive it. In the Marvel setting, Ego is technically one of the Celestials, though he developed differently, a central brain instead of the metallic bodies of his kin, later encrusted with rock until it resembled a planet. But Ego rarely responded to those summonses. Ostracized by the other Celestials and busy scattering his seeds to father new worlds, he ignored Arisham's call. Those Celestials not otherwise occupied perceived Arisham's message and turned toward its origin. But as the summons went out, something else happened. Arisham had intended to continue observing the corrupted planet and the enemy hidden within, yet a new, terrible signal arrived from across the starry gulf. Sparks of golden energy flickered in Arisham's 6 cosmos-burning eye sockets. He turned his gaze behind him, letting it pierce across countless galaxies, and fixed it on a vivid blue world. Information flooded his mind. A Celestial had died. Tiamat. The name rolled from him like the toll of a bell, flat, devoid of overt feeling, yet the universe itself registered it. The vacuum cannot carry sound, but celestial energies around beings such as Arisham serve as a medium, and the announcement rippled outward. Arisham reached to sense Tiamat's life sign, the living presence he had felt not long before. There was nothing. Tiamat's energy had vanished. He thought of the human he had confronted inside Tina's mind. That encounter had revealed purple energy on a mortal, energy that matched the natural enemy of a celestial. Now the worst had come to pass. An unborn celestial had been slain. In the universe, a celestial's birth is an event that happens only once in perhaps 1 billion years. For one about to be born to wither before ever taking form was almost unthinkable. Arisham himself had remarked in older accounts that celestials are born only once in 1 billion years. The apparent rapid births seen by Ajak and her cohort may have been the result of a much wider net cast at the same time, catching an exceptional surge. Though his voice betrayed no shock, Arisham was not without disturbance. If anyone had been nearby, they would have seen the asteroid belts that ringed him, white lines of rock that constantly orbited his vast form, shudder, crack, and pulverize under a surge of energy, then reconstitute. Those cycles of destruction and renewal were the outward sign of the turbulence inside him. The movie's depiction of events had Arisham unperturbed by Tiamat's death. He merely took an Eternal from Earth to study and decide whether the planet deserved judgment. But this situation was different. Tiamat had not been undone by an Eternal or by a human quarrel. The killer was an entity from an outer universe, a being that posed a profound threat to Celestials themselves. If a member of your own kin falls because of a domestic dispute, that is one thing. If an outsider strikes and threatens the whole family, that is another entirely. Arisham's displeasure at such interference was deep. He glanced at Earth, then at the corrupted galaxy nearby, weighing his options. After a moment, he decided. Extending a palm, he poured cosmic energy outward again and shaped it into a golden sphere. Not a star, but a recording of sound and command. Into that sound record sphere, he imprinted his message. He would go to Earth first. Tiamat's death was a warning. The master of the black energy might already be moving. The corrupted galaxy, by comparison, had not yet shown catastrophic effects, so Earth demanded priority. Arisham prepared to set his course, his summons radiating through space, calling the Celestials to converge where the next judgment would be made. Chapter 498, Thanos' Vigilance. Arisham the Judge intended to deal with matters on Earth first. The news of Tiamat's death was a warning sign. Forces from other universes might already be reaching into this one. That made Arisham cautious. The adjacent corrupted void galaxy could wait. After all, it was anchored in place. How could it truly escape? Still, Arisham knew calm surfaces often hid unknown dangers. Before leaving, he left a message inside an energy orb, instructing the other Celestials that upon arrival, they were not to handle the corrupted void galaxy, but to come to Earth and assist him against the enemy from another universe. Having created the orb, Arisham set it adrift in space and then used cosmic energy to continue toward Earth. The space behind him warped. Cosmic energy swelled and enveloped his colossal form, briefly forming a red-black hole. It spun, contracted, and swallowed nearby debris. Even light could not escape. Yet the message orb remained untouched, hovering calmly as runes shimmered across its surface. The black hole existed only for an instant before collapsing and vanishing. Arisham had used his black hole teleport to traverse the cosmos, bound for Earth, but the voyage was long. He would not reach the solar system that same day. Once the hole closed, the lifeless galaxy sank back into silence. Only the orb Arisham had left continued to glow, the deep glyphs on it pulsing with meaning. If any civilization were fortunate enough to witness and decipher those runes, the Celestials' message could trigger a quantum leap in their technology. Of course, there were no other inhabited worlds in this galaxy or within dozens of light years. The only galaxy that had harbored life was the corrupted Void Galaxy, and it too had fallen silent, long ago turned into a playground for the corruption. In that purple-tinged galaxy, the grotesque Void Star, the enormous staring eye at its center, seemed to be fixed on the place where Aurelion had been. At the Void Star's maw, Sanctuary 2, which Thanos had corrupted into a living vessel with void power, had replaced the planetary core and now occupied the center of the Void Star. Under the influence of void energy, it did not need to endure ordinary planetary pressures. Here it served as Thanos' palace. Thanos, feigning sleep on his throne, opened his eyes. A strange purple glow flickered from them. The Void Star had sent a communication. Below the throne, Black Dwarf, Thanos' right hand, arrived and readied himself to report. The entire Void Legion had undergone a void transformation. Their bodies had been altered and enhanced, their skin and forms shifted into something both alien and more robust. Black Dwarf, once withered and bluish-black, now bore pale skin with a purple undertone, no longer shriveled but firm and full. Thanos himself had changed little in appearance aside from a deeper purple hue, though the enlarged, modified throne suggested his stature had grown. "My Lord Thanos," Black Dwarf said, kneeling at his side. He raised his head, eyes full of reverence. The monitors detected a powerful energy fluctuation in the neighboring galaxy. I know," Thanos replied, leaning back and resting his chin on one hand, his voice absolute. "Send an elite void reconnaissance team. I want to know everything." "Yes, my Lord Thanos, the future ruler of the universe and the void," Black Dwarf intoned, bowing. Then he lifted himself with psychokinesis and floated from the hall to carry out the command. Thanos watched him go, a flicker of thought in his eyes. He considered the source of the disturbance. After the corrupted void had been purified in the void dimension by Noah, Thanos had lost a steady source of void corruption power. To solve that, he had transformed Corvus Glaive's body into a void core and grafted it into a planet's core, turning that world into a void star. That new void star could devour energy and life force, converting them into void corruption power. It had consumed all life on its surface, leaving utter desolation, and now continuously spewed the purple mist of void corruption power into the galaxy. Thanos released that corrupted energy to devour any energy-bearing bodies in the system, other planets, even the central star. Though no worlds with life remained, the sun and the dead planets still contained vast reserves of energy. They were inferior to living energies in value, but plentiful enough to be worth harvesting. Thanos' Void Legion was currently in a state of recuperation and control, but he remained cautious. The powerful fluctuation detected in the neighboring galaxy could be nothing, or it could be the first sign of something that threatened everything he had rebuilt. He would not let it go unanswered. Chapter 499, The Void Legion, detected the information light ball. As the most powerful beings in the universe, the Celestials towered over nearly all cosmic life, power measured in orders of magnitude. They rarely bothered to hide their presence. Like in the film when they came to Earth, they did not conceal themselves. They appeared in Earth's outer space and took the Eternals and others away. The Celestials paid little heed to the opinions of lesser beings. For most life forms in the cosmos, a lifetime would pass without ever seeing a Celestial. Those few who did usually met their end and stood before the judgment of a Celestial. Still, despite their habit of acting openly, Aurelion the Judge had used his black hole teleportation with deliberate stealth when he departed earlier. He judged the situation on Earth urgent and planned to go to the solar system first. The corrupted void galaxy immediately before him he chose not to disturb, for now. He intended to handle that threat, which also came from an outer universe, after he finished with Earth. Before leaving, Aurelion left an information orb detailing the corrupted void galaxy, his plans, and his whereabouts for any other Celestials who might arrive following his summons. In the orb, he warned them to treat these outer universe forces with caution and to wait for his return before jointly investigating or acting. Erisham had always treated these outsiders with the utmost vigilance. As he left, he took extra care to mask his energy fluctuations so the other side would have no chance to detect him. What let Thanos and his forces detect the Celestials' spatial fluctuations in the neighboring galaxy was not a lapse on Arisham's part, so much as the void corruption power and the massive, unnerving void star. The grotesque, twisted eye that had grown on the void star's surface was not mere decoration. This demonic eye, painstakingly formed by void corruption, functioned like a vast radar satellite. Its reach spanned several light years, enough to pick up energy signatures from one galaxy to the next. So even though Arishem had tried to conceal his fluctuations, the Void Eye's detection system, an apparatus born of an outer universe, picked him up and directly reported it to Thanos. Black Dwarf's reconnaissance also used the Void Star's eye, allowing his scouts to detect the same spatial disturbances. But the Void Star had relayed the discovery straight to Thanos, so the Mad Titan already knew before Black Dwarf could report. Thanos sent out a reconnaissance force. From the gaping maw of the Void Heart, beside its vast, writhing tongue, Thanos' Void Chitauri emerged, riding modified Void craft. For the Void Star, the space between tongue and mouth might be only a gap. For the Chitauri, it was an immense, boundless world. Squadrons of black ships poured from the fissure like specters, crossed the local jump point, and leaped into the neighboring galaxy. Once through the jump point, they fanned out like a hunting wolf pack, combing interstellar space for anomalous energies. These craft, infused with void energy, bore eerie ocular devices, rotating, unblinking eyes that matched the Void Star's precision. Their gazes pierced cosmic mists, cataloging every subtle fluctuation. Before long, a reconnaissance squad captured abnormal readings. On the demonic eye radar, a light spot resolved, the energy information orb Arishem had left. As they closed, the squad saw the golden sphere hanging several thousand kilometers away. To a celestial, it might resemble a small glass bead, but this orb was nearly 10 kilometers in diameter, a little lamp suspended in space. The squad approached carefully, recording and scanning the surrounding energies. Up close, mysterious runes flowed across the orb's surface. They logged everything and then withdrew from the system, returning to the Void Galaxy through the jump point. The reconnaissance team intended to report their find to their lord Thanos and await orders. The squad that found the orb returned alone to the Void Star while the others continued sweeping the galaxy. Once inside, the information stored in the craft streamed directly to Thanos. "It looks artificially created," the scout reported in the Grand Hall. "Aside from the life planet that wasn't transformed into a Void Star, there are no other interstellar civilizations in that system. My Lord Thanos, shall we send a team to retrieve the sphere for further study?" A giant projection unfolded before the throne, displaying photos and videos the reconnaissance team had taken, with the orb's energy readings flickering at the side. Black Dwarf bowed low and suggested that the remaining squads pull the orb back for analysis. Thanos said nothing. He narrowed his eyes and stared at the images, silent and deep in thought. Black Dwarf kept his bowed posture, waiting in respectful silence. Thanos sat on his throne, eyes narrowed, staring at the image projected before him, a golden orb with mysterious runes streaming across its surface. The light of the orb was reflected in his pupils, making his gaze seem even deeper. The hall was silent, except for the faint hum of the void spaceship that served as the projection's source. These runes. Most beings would have seen only unfamiliar symbols, but Thanos recognized them at once. They were the cosmic runes of the Celestials. Few civilizations could trace their origin. Only the Eternals, the race the Celestials had created, could glimpse a fraction of their meaning. Thanos knew because he was one of the Eternals. The Eternals, forged by the Celestials, had scattered and diversified over eons. Some remained close to their makers, like Ajax's contingent on Earth. Most simply became legend. Thanos' homeworld, Titan, was one of their settlements. Physically, many Eternals bore the same human-like appearance. Ajax, Eros, and others resembled ordinary people. But Thanos had not. A mutation in his embryonic genes had altered his body. Greater strength, a different physiology, and the purple skin that would earn him the epithet Mad Titan. His divergence was not some cosmic accident of identity. It was genetic, a quirk that made him stronger and darker in presence. As an Eternal, Thanos knew the Celestials' mark when he saw it. On Titan, myths about them and their runes were everywhere. The Celestials had been credited with shaping stars, existing before the great cosmological divisions, even with stirring the first light after the Big Bang. To many, those stories read as tall tales, but the Eternals' existence proved there had been truth to them. So when the Golden Orb's runes flowed across the projection, a cold thought prickled at him. Had the Celestials been watching him from a place he hadn't noticed? Even Thanos' usually unshakable composure wavered. He had drunk deep of void power and believed in its destructive primacy. He thought of the void as a cancer to the cosmos, a force few could match. But the Celestials were different. He had seen hints of their power and heard their legends since childhood. He could not afford hubris now. If they had truly arrived, he could not assume he had time to consolidate or expand the void's reach. If he hesitated, escape might become impossible. He set his chin on his hand, then lowered his arm. "Black Dwarf," he said, voice hard and final, "order all external units to cease operations and withdraw immediately." Black Dwarf bowed, as he always did in the presence of Thanos. "Yes, Master." Without question, the words were absolute law to him. He lifted off with a flick of telekinesis and flew from the hall to carry the command outward. A purple gleam in Thanos' pupils traced the rest of his orders. He spoke to the Void Star itself, directing it to begin a pre-evacuation. The vessel responded. Its vast central eye, veined with purplish-black blood vessels, rolled. Its cavernous maw below spread wide, and an impossible suction tore outward. Space shuddered and warped. Nearby rocks and minor bodies trembled as gravity spiked. Satellites and small planetoids were ripped free and flung toward that enormous mouth. The void power the ship had been siphoning out into the system recoiled as if called back by an invisible hand. Energy that had been feeding the Void Star's projects now surged homeward, pulling along meteors and shattered detritus. Streams of purple energy flowed like a torrent. Asteroids and small celestial bodies were crushed almost at once under the barrage of concentrated gravity. Recon teams returning through a jump point were caught in the wake. The small crews and vessels that had been scouting neighboring galaxies were pulverized the moment they re-entered the system, their remains shredded by the Void Star's crushing pull. The Void Chitauri squads awaiting them froze, alarmed into immediate halt by the destructive display. When the Void Star had absorbed the majority of the dispersed void power, its maw sealed. The grotesque, distorted eye pulsed and then flared, casting an intense lavender light across the chamber and the starfield beyond. A low, resonant vibration hummed through the air, zzz, as the ship completed its recall and braced for whatever came next.